Covering the areas of Auburn and Bankstown, this is your local station, 100.9 2BACR.
Good evening and welcome to Wednesday Night Zombie Fever, minus Steph and Bridget. It's just me, Rachel, for your Wednesday night this week. And coming up, I will be talking to you on your thoughts on karma after our successful and quite heated debate on fate last week. We want to know what you think of karma. Do you believe in it? Would you like to believe in it? We'll also be talking about, I'll be talking about whether TV shows are better as single episode arcs or complete season arcs. So let me know if you've got any examples of how you like your TV shows. Later on I'll be reviewing Gone with the Wind. First up, we'll get straight into the music. This is Imagine Dragons with Radioactive on 2BACR 100.9 FM. I am here all by myself today to talk about karma and whether or not you believe in karma. So we realised that, as last week with fate, we've got to define these things right off the bat. And as we do, being our nice prepared self, we are using dictionary.com. So, karma is a noun, pronounced karma. It is an action seen as bringing upon oneself inevitable results, good or bad, either in this life or in a reincarnation. Then there's the cosmic principle according to which each person is rewarded or punished in one incarnation according to that person's deeds in the previous incarnation. And finally, the good or bad emanations felt to be generated by someone or something. So there you go. And I think all of us can agree that everyone loves the idea of karma. It's this cosmic justice that when you do good, good things will happen to you, bad things will happen to bad people. So everyone can understand the appeal of karma. But I think we all know that there are plenty of cases where people do not get rewarded for good things and that good things happen to bad people. So the question is, do you believe in karma and do you have any stories of karma? I'm mixed. On the one hand, I'd love to believe in it. There's probably plenty of examples of it, but it's probably not a guarantee. But here are some examples of stories that could make you believe in karma. This is taken from cracked.com. All credit to Cracked for this one. At number 5, a stop sign thief killed in a car accident. So this guy stole stop signs in his spare time. He did this a lot of times in Ohio. And apparently this can cause deadly traffic problems. So not just your average prank. Then apparently one night, Myers ran an unstolen stop sign. When he drove onto the highway after blowing straight through the intersection, he was hit by a semi and later pronounced dead on the scene. So there you go. Person steals a stop sign and then gets run over by a stop sign that wasn't stolen. Does that count as karma? So this is the question. Do you believe in karma? Obviously, those examples are good examples of people basically being annoying and then ironic circumstances befalling them. But does karma have to be ironic? Does it have to be something that's related to... that's obviously also examples of bad things happening to bad people. Do you have any examples of good things happening to people doing good things, though? One of our listeners on Facebook, Chris, do you know the difference between irony and coincidence? Hint, Alanis Morissette got it wrong. Yes, she did. Especially since she said that it's like a death row pardon 2 minutes too late. I wouldn't call that irony, but we're talking karma. Karma, Chris, do you believe in karma? I'm going to throw up a poll on the Facebook page about this, and I'll be back. In the meantime, this is Lana Del Rey on 2BACR 100.9 FM. Welcome back to Wednesday Night Zombie Fever on 2BACR 100.9 FM. I'm abandoning my talk on karma because nobody wants to talk about karma, apparently. In the meantime, I have to berate everyone who failed to turn up tonight, all of my backups who came up with excuses such as I'm in Queensland or I'm busy. Nobody's busy from 9 till 11 at night, except me. And okay, Steph and Bridget are in Japan. I give them a pass. In the meantime, I do know that people are actually listening because you are all getting onto Facebook, lolling at things and liking things, which is great. So I'm going to skip ahead to our next topic, which is TV shows. Oh, and as always, song requests. We have had a request for Tongue Tied by Group Love, which is great. I love that song. So whoever requested that, you're awesome. Great taste in music, by the way. And I will get some of the songs from last week on as well. I just need to find them. But don't worry, I'll get them on because I'm not under the dictatorial regime of Stephanie and Bridget this week. So I can do whatever you want. That sounded creepy. But in a completely non-creepy way, talking about TV shows, whether you prefer single episode story arcs or season-long arcs. An episode arc would be where within a single episode, a storyline is introduced, developed, and resolved. Season-long story arcs are where that story is told over the entire season. So each of these have their benefits. And the main difference would be that with a single episode arc, you can just jump in and watch that episode. With a season-long arc, you have to watch the entire season to be able to know what's going on. You can't jump in halfway. The downside is that with an episode-long arc, you don't have that same drive to watch the next episode. With season-long arcs, you're really pushing your audience to tune in every single week, or to download them every single week, as the case may be. So which one do you prefer? And do you know of any examples of shows which have pulled this off quite well? Especially if they've pulled off the mix of both quite well, where you can jump in and watch an episode, but at the same time, you are encouraged to watch the next one through a season-long story arc. So we have had some feedback on Facebook. So Dave has said that as long as it's a good show, season-long shows are probably best. Chris has also voted for season-long arcs. We do have this poll up on Facebook, so get on and vote on that. Dave and Chris, let me know, why do you prefer the season-long story arcs? Because I'm a single episode arc girl myself. I don't know what kind of girl you two are. I prefer episodes where you can just watch an episode. You don't have to go back and watch the entire season. Because this happened to me with Game of Thrones. Everybody was talking about Game of Thrones, saying, you've got to watch Game of Thrones, it's the best show on the planet. But by this time, it was already into season 2, so I just jumped in then and didn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand why everybody hated the blonde guy. Turned out he killed a bunch of people at the end of the first season, and he was kind of a jerk. And that's important context. You don't get all of that context in the previously on Game of Thrones at the beginning of the episode. So there are obviously reasons why season-long arcs are also good, but let me know your reasons on Facebook any second now. I know you're listening, guys. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Okay, you're not going to tell me. Fine. Well, if you want to jump on there and defend standalone episodes or any TV show which you think has had a really good mix of both season-long arcs but that have very good individual episodes, jump on there and vote in our poll, because so far season-long arcs is winning with a grand total of a vote. And keep those song requests coming as well. Here's another comment from Facebook as to our episode-long versus season-long story arcs. Doctor Who Series 5 was the bomb, and your short attention span betrays you. I don't know whether that's a commentary on Doctor Who Series 5 or is he talking towards me. I have a fine attention span. Over there. And Game of Thrones is a political thingy. Good use of vocabulary there, Chris. You can't jump on a political thingy. One show that walked the line well was The Newsroom. Great individual episodes and fantastic arc overall. Good feedback, Chris. My problem with Game of Thrones, since he does seem to be defending Game of Thrones, Chris, my problem with Game of Thrones is that each individual episode didn't follow enough of any one character to have a complete storyline. If you would say, what happened in this episode of Game of Thrones, it would take a while. You'd have to reference every other part of the season or of the entire show. Apparently it was a commentary on me, but I've probably gotten distracted by now. Yes, I have. And there is somebody here defending on Facebook, defending the mix of both episode-long and season-long arcs. Jasmine has said, why does it need to be one or the other if Stephen Moffat can manage to do both? So on, for those of you playing along at home, Stephen Moffat is the writer of, I think, most of Doctor Who series 4, 5 and 6. Also, Dave on Facebook has said, one episode is too short. You tell it one part at a time and slowly learn more about the characters and the adventures throughout their lives. One of my favourite shows, Sons of Anarchy and The Walking Dead. Those ones. But, so Dave, who has said that single episode stories are too short, do you think that having an entire season, or not so much having an entire season, obviously every show has to have an entire season, otherwise it's just a movie, having season-long arcs, do you think it can be detrimental to trying to gain audiences throughout the season? It is very weird talking to people on Facebook, for anybody who's not on Facebook. Oh, you're all on Facebook. Yes, go on. Because I find that there are some shows that I've been trying to get into, but they've obviously got these season-long arcs, and you can't just jump in because it doesn't resolve anything. There's no individual episode story arc. I think I agree with Chris on Doctor Who Series 5. I also think Supernatural did this very well, where they had their Monster of the Week, especially in season 5 and 6. They had their Monster of the Week, but it was part of a larger season-long story arc. And they managed that quite well. Emma on Facebook has said that ER is the best excellent season-length storyline, yet individual episodes have enough context to be able to just jump in. Best excellent is an interesting expression, Emma, who is also a teacher. So obviously we've got quite a number of engaged listeners on Facebook this week. Keep that debate going through our next couple of songs. This was requested by the gorgeous Rachel on Facebook. This is Tongue Tied by Group Love on 2BACR 100.9 FM. Welcome back to Wednesday Night Zombie Fever with Rachel on 2BACR 100.9 FM. So we're just talking about story arcs, season-long versus single episode-long arcs, and TV shows which had done each of those quite well. This is another part of story arcs, and that is parts of stories or various points which disappear. So those aborted story arcs, when an arc just disappears off the face of the storyline without warning, never to be heard from again. So let me know on Facebook or by calling 9793 1009 of any storylines that you know of in shows that you're a fan of where a storyline has just disappeared. Maybe it's something that the writers had planned to come back to that hadn't really worked out, or maybe it's something which then went in a different direction and then things didn't really make sense that had happened before. Basically, any examples that had of TV shows that had just disappeared. So here's an example. The 4th season of Charmed, where kind of Phoebe gets pregnant with like the source of all evil. Basically, it had, you know, a lot of potential in that particular storyline. And then instead it's kind of moved into the fact that like the child was a surrogate of this other person. And then when that storyline was over, it was never mentioned again. And all that happened within the last few minutes of the second to last episode of this season. So it kind of they just passed over that really quickly. It's something that had been a major part of that season, then it was just never spoken of again. I think we all know examples of when this has happened, both when a storyline has just been completely abandoned and when a very poignant piece of the season or piece of the story is then never mentioned again. I guess another example would be when, characters, or especially family members of the main characters, get written out of the show and then they're never mentioned again. I sort of realised this with Gossip Girl when, it's one thing to have characters that come and go and it's fine, but particularly siblings, because that you need to explain them. When Belair had her wedding in the second to last season, it was odd that Eric Vanderwoodson, Serena's brother, didn't show up. And of course, after both Serena's brother and Dan's sister, they both kind of got written out of the show, and it was explained that, one of them moved to Paris and wherever. But then there were all of these family events, and you think, well, why aren't they there, and why aren't they even being mentioned? So let me know on Facebook any examples of storylines that you think TV shows maybe abandoned too quickly, or that you think just didn't really fit. Meanwhile, we've also been getting more feedback on whether or not you prefer TV shows with standalone episodes or season-long story arcs. And there's been more support for Doctor Who. Brendan has said that he finds Doctor Who handles standalone episodes very well, that he jumped in at season 5 and can enjoy and understand it without having to go back through 30 years of episodes. I agree with that. I think I jumped into Doctor Who at about the end of season 4 or season 5 and kind of picked it up quite easily. And Doctor Who is one of those TV shows that does that very well. Despite being about time travel and having so many episodes, it is hard to jump into some other TV shows. Some more examples of some aborted story arcs are available on tvtropes.org. Just search for aborted arc and that will have a whole bunch of examples. Here's another question related to storylines that are just never heard from again. When is it okay to leave a storyline unfinished? I think Doctor Who, which has been mentioned obviously by a number of our listeners, is one of those things where you forgive a lot of inconsistencies very quickly because it's all wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. So it doesn't really matter that, the TARDIS exploding is just never mentioned again, or that certain big events are never mentioned again, because that's part of the show. Then you get to other series, things like Heroes, where you've got these entire arcs that are just never really mentioned again, and they seem to drop things very quickly. Also episodes like, seasons like Lost, where you never really, not all of those story arcs were resolved. Some more feedback on Facebook. Everyone's really getting into this season-long versus episode-long story arc talk, but keep that up. Okay, yeah. And we've got more song requests. I am about to play your song request, so stop just telling me to play your song request. I'm getting it on now. It's hard, there's nobody else to talk while I'm fiddling with buttons and things. And there are a lot of buttons, guys. I should take a photo of this and post it on that Facebook page that I keep talking about. Anyway, keep talking about story arcs, TV story arcs on Facebook. Let me know, in particular, any storylines that you think have played really well on television and any storylines that you think weren't really suited to that episodic method of storytelling. Coming up, we've got a couple of requests from you listeners out there on Facebook. We have, first up, request from last week, I'm Too Sexy by Right Said Fred. Truly a one-hit wonder from those guys. And after that, we've got some Snow Patrol. You're listening to 2BACR 100.9 FM. Welcome back to Wednesday Night Zombie Fever on 2BACR 100.9 FM. So we've had a question, what happened to my special guest hosts? Because some people weren't asked, even though they're just sitting at home listening to Wednesday Night Zombie Fever on the radio. Well, you see, I did ask people. I think they were busy, but they're not busy because they're commenting on Facebook. But don't worry, I promise, next week, the other two are still in Japan, and I will have the best co-hosts ever. If you do have any suggestions of co-hosts, now I've got a high bar, okay? Because obviously Stephanie and Bridget set the bar pretty high. So if you think that you can best Stephanie and Bridget as a co-host on Wednesday Night Zombie Fever, let me know on Wednesday Night Zombie Fever Facebook page. And I will strongly consider your suggestion. In the meantime, there is a new poll up on Wednesday Night Zombie Fever. And the question is, who is the best WNZF presenter? Now, I'm the only one here looking at that poll, so I strongly suggest you vote Rachel. I'll be voting Rachel. In fact, I'll do that right now. There you go. With one vote, I'm currently winning. So let us know who you think the best WNZF presenter is. In the meantime, I've still got a few polls going on the Facebook page. Whether or not you prefer TV shows with standalone episodes to season-long arcs, and all of our discussions from last week on Fate, as well as this week's discussion on Karma. Remember, you can always give me a call as well on 979310009. I know that I have been having some phone problems without being able to hear people on the other end of the phone tonight, but I am sure that that will be resolved momentarily. No one's doing anything for them. I just assume that Karma will intervene and they'll be fine soon. In the meantime, it is nearly 10 o'clock, which means it is time for our movie review. Steph's not here, Brit's not here, which means that I am left to do the movie review, and this week I am reviewing Gone with the Wind. It's a classic. We've all heard of Gone with the Wind. Let me know on the Facebook page whether or not you've actually seen it. It's one of those films that I think everybody should be ashamed if they haven't. But at the same time, it is a very long film. So for those of you who don't know about Gone with the Wind, if you only know the name, no, it's not a tornado film. It's not about a cyclone. And nothing actually goes anywhere, really. Basically, it's the story of a young woman and her experiences throughout the American Civil War and its aftermath. The movie is about 3 to 4 hours long, and it's split into two sections. The first follows Scarlett O'Hara and her experiences, as I said, during the Civil War, in the American South, in Atlanta. The second half is her rebuilding after the war. So obviously it's a very long film, and modern audiences probably aren't accustomed to sitting through a film of that length. It does have an intermission partway through. Anything with an intermission usually indicates that it's quite long. That being said, the costuming and the staging really do resemble modern epic films. It's not in, I guess when you think of older films, you think of things where you can clearly see a backdrop or very simple production value. And Gone with the Wind, it still stands the test of time in many ways. It still has all of that feel of older films, but it really does have a really high production value. If you don't like long films, it's definitely not for you, but it is quite captivating despite its length. If you don't like historical films, again, probably not your cup of tea, but it does have quite a bit of action, romance, and really a lot of different genres. So this is definitely a film that you should be watching at least once in your life. So I definitely recommend going out and getting it. Out of 10, I would probably give it an 8 out of 10. So the only thing that's really holding it back would be the length. There are some parts which feel a little long, and I think it's just because being part of a modern audience, we expect things to be very fast and stories to be told in as simple a way as possible. And this really is a chronicle of events during and following the war. In terms of the themes, it does have resonant themes for modern audiences about rebuilding after hardship. So definitely a film that you should see. We do have some feedback on Gone with the Wind on Facebook. And Dave has said that he's never watched Gone with the Wind, but of course he's heard of it. And I think it pretty much sums up Gone with the Wind for the modern age. A lot of people have heard of it. It's one of those films everyone's heard of, but not everyone has seen, probably because it's quite hard to come by. It doesn't get aired on TV a lot, partly because of its length. If you're going to show an old film, you're probably going to show something that doesn't take as long, particularly with ads, I think. To watch Gone with the Wind now on TV would definitely put it towards the 5, even more hour-long mark. Got some more feedback on Facebook as to TV show storylines, though. On abandoned TV show storylines, Brendan has said that the second baby story from Battlestar Galactica was a bit of a cop-out, just by saying, oh, it's not your baby. I think there definitely seems to be a theme here with baby storylines, that babies tend to disappear a lot on TV shows. I don't know if anyone listening or hanging out on Facebook has noticed this, but there are times when people have a baby or they're pregnant and you just never see the kid ever again. So do you think, I mean, obviously a baby storyline is quite convenient for a lot of TV shows to create drama and create intensity, but does it also kind of write them into a corner in a way that they then have to include that kid as part of the storyline? Does it create more problems than it does storylines? Let me know about that on the Facebook page or by giving me a call on 97931009. In the meantime, this is another song request. This is from Emma. This is Tight Fittin' Jeans on 2BACR 100.9 FM. Yep, we're back on Wednesday Night Zombie Fever with just me. And Celine Dion, apparently. That last song request was for Emma. That was Tight Fittin' Jeans. And let me know any songs that you want requested on the 2BACR Facebook page or on the Wednesday Night Zombie Fever Facebook page as well. Remember to share all of the posts on the Wednesday Night Zombie Fever Facebook page so we can get more listeners, so you can stop feeling so alone like me. Anyway, moving on. So we've been talking about story arcs and television story arcs in particular. So I wanted to know if there are any storylines or arcs or any types of story arcs that you have found particularly interesting or that you particularly don't like. So we mentioned a second ago baby arcs. So character gets pregnant, they have a baby, usually never see it again. And do you think that those storylines are effective? Now, a lot of shows do this. Obviously, Glee did this. I think Glee is probably a very good example of when we sort of saw that kid when somebody else adopted it, but most of the characters involved in that storyline have moved on, and we don't really hear about that at all anymore. More song requests coming in. I will get some Regina Spektor on for you, Jasmine. Don't have that particular song, I don't think, but I will get a couple of Regina Spektor songs on there for you. So obviously pregnancy story arcs are one. Marriage story arcs are another. So obviously people get engaged. That's usually a big storyline. Again, Glee is probably an example of of a TV show which didn't do that very well. Obviously, Finn and Rachel, they were engaged, but they're in high school, so it didn't really work out. Any other types of storylines which you think just don't really work? And in particular, really epic storylines which perhaps don't go so well when you have to have another season after that. Supernatural had this problem with season 4. Basically, the producers thought this was going to be their last season. So they were ramping up for a really big, epic finale. Had a storyline with the devil, was going to be released from hell and things like that. Then got the okay for another season, so had to reel that back in and write a new season arc for season 5. Thinking again that was going to be the last season. They're now up to season 8. I think they just wrapped up season 8. And basically they had to keep getting bigger. Obviously supernatural and sci-fi TV shows are possibly the worst victims of this, where you try to create a bigger and badder, I guess, nemesis throughout every season. And what happens when you defeat that enemy? So Charmed had this, where obviously they were getting stronger and stronger as witches, and then they kept getting stronger and stronger opponents. How many times can you save the world, basically? So let me know on Facebook if you have seen any of these shows and whether you know of any shows that did this very well or very poorly. I would say Supernatural is an example of one which did this very well, because each of those season-long arcs, each of those season-long villains flowed on from the previous one. And also because the characters themselves were sort of commenting on, okay, how many times can we save the world? Haven't we done this enough? Isn't there anybody else who can do this? And so it's very much part of the development of the characters. In comparison, something like Charmed, where the characters were continually saving the world, yes, the characters did get a bit sick of that and it was sort of commented on. But that was another one where I think it went longer than the producers had anticipated, as in they were ramping up for an ending and then it got renewed. In particular, the break between, I think it was season 7 and season 8. At the end of season 7, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen Charmed or has no interest in Charmed, they fake their deaths and then get these new faces and life goes on anyway. But then season 8 happened and they have to press the reverse button to get them back to who they were. So obviously season 8 probably wasn't expected when they wrote the previous finale. Another example from a listener on Facebook, Buffy and Angel should have ended earlier, but the last couple of seasons of both shows weren't so great. So that's probably another example. I think, as I said, it's supernatural sci-fi sort of shows that get this problem of ramping up to a big finale only to be renewed. Probably good for most shows to get renewed. But I think supernatural and sci-fi TV shows are those ones that really need to know whether or not they're getting renewed before they do their finale, because they really need to wrap things up and they really need to know whether they're going to need characters and things for the next season. If anybody knows an example of perhaps something that isn't a, magical, supernatural or sci-fi show that has also had this problem of making a finale which they then have to sort of hit the reverse on in the next season, let me know on Facebook or by calling 9793 1009. In the meantime, still talking about story arcs, and story arcs that you like or don't like, whether it's types of story arcs or just particular story arcs as well. Sorry, just reading some of your comments and input on Facebook. I see that our Who's the Best Presenter poll isn't going too well. I'm still the only person who has voted, and I voted for me. Come on, people. I'm the only one here. I'm playing your requests. I'm pushing the buttons. Nope, still just me. Yep, so story arcs that you like, plot lines that perhaps you don't like. As we know, as I've mentioned, I'm a fan of the episode-long arc. Again, supernatural shows do tend to have the villain of the week. Also, procedural cop shows. Now, I don't like procedural cop shows. I just find them boring. I don't know why we need NCIS and then NCIS New York and then NCIS Crime Scene Investigation Special Victims Unit things. But they're also good with having individual episodes that you can just jump into. But here's the thing, when it comes to story arcs, how well do those individual episode TV shows do complete story arcs? How well does the individual episode fit into the larger story? As I said, Supernatural did this quite well. Compare that to, say, sitcoms. Obviously, all of these TV shows that we've been talking about so far are mostly dramas. So think sitcoms that do have both the overarching storyline throughout the season and individual storylines that you can just jump into. I think that sitcoms are the best example of you can just jump in and watch a single episode without any previous knowledge of the characters or the plot or the relationship between the characters. I don't know where I'm going with this because I'm still too busy looking at Facebook. But do you know any, comedies as well, is what I was getting to, are really good at introducing something and then abandoning a storyline. You never have to see it again and you don't really care. So comparing, in relation to storylines, comparing comedies, half-hour comedies, to hour-long dramas, obviously comedies can get away with a lot more. And I want to know, are you more forgiving of comedies when it comes to all of these TV show tropes, I guess? Are you more forgiving of storylines that are abandoned in comedies than those that are abandoned in dramas? And are you more forgiving of comedies in general when things perhaps don't make all that sense compared to dramas? This is, in the meantime, Metric with Help I'm Alive and then Speed the Collapse on 2BACR 100.9 FM. Welcome back to Wednesday Night Zombie Fever. And a woman in a sumo wrestler suit assaulted her ex-girlfriend in a gay pub after she waved at a man dressed as a Snickers bar. Now that I have your attention, that is a true story. Also, giant feral cats as big as goats are rampaging through Arnhem Land in the Northern Territory, and a man stabbed his father with scissors before sawing off his own hands in a very bizarre attack, and now both are fighting for their lives in hospital. Obviously, that last one was a little grim, but yeah. Sumo fighting suit thing was real. Meanwhile, Facebook. I am paying attention to everything you're saying on Facebook and all of your song requests. I've got Regina Spektor coming up next on 2BACR. And speaking of Facebook, apparently Facebook employees are livid on how good they have it in their workplace. Apparently a whole bunch of Facebook employees have been complaining about working at the tech giant. One employee has said that beer pong was the unofficial sport of the company and that workers were expected to drink and hang out with co-workers outside of work on a regular basis. The complaints have been that there's a lot of peer pressure type elements that don't exist at other companies, such as playing beer pong and being encouraged to be themselves. Some of the other complaints have been that CIO Sheryl Sandberg's extracurricular activities were distracting. That's all the information we've been given on what those extracurricular activities are, and that Mark Zuckerberg's holier-than-thou attitude was a problem. So here's the question. These people, I mean, they've also got it pretty good. Facebook apparently seems to be quite a lax little workplace, and yet they're complaining about it. Is there anything that you've ever complained about that you think probably isn't a complaint? I can see how a lot of these things may be a problem if you're trying to get your work done, and if you're at work to do your work, it could be a little annoying that people are trying to make it have to be more of a social club than it actually is, particularly if somebody was going to come back and use that against you, as though, I mean, I'm sure many people listening are aware that maybe you don't want your Facebook page kind of inundated with people that you work with for pretty much this reason, that you kind of want to separate your social self from your work self in many occasions, just because there's no need for your employer to know what you're doing on the weekend, particularly if what you're doing on the weekend involves some of these extracurricular activities that aren't explained here. I, for one, have pictures of myself in an avatar costume on Facebook. But then again, who doesn't, right? So is there anything that you would complain about at your workplace, or maybe even at uni, that you think probably aren't real complaints? Maybe things that you've got a little too good, that you might want a little stricter, I guess, control over. Because I've had both. I think most of us listening will have had both experiences of really strict workplaces and then relatively lax workplaces. I think most workplaces these days are pretty tight in terms of managing breaks, managing when you arrive and when you leave. But if anyone listening, can let me know on Facebook if you've had a particularly lax workplace that you think maybe wasn't the best management style. And again, if you've had any experiences where maybe you did have a little too good, that it was more of a detriment than you think. Apparently another complaint from somebody at Facebook was that there was too much food around. Too much food. I have to say, too much food definitely hasn't been a problem at any of my workplaces. Obviously, we here at 2BACR are pretty lax on account of people can just go to Japan and leave their other co-host sitting here reading the news. Yeah, I'm actually quite proud that I found this story. And the story of the sumo wrestling gay pub story. So yeah, let me know on Facebook what you think of that. In the meantime, as promised, here is Regina Spektor with All the Rowboats on 2BACR 100.9 FM. Welcome back to Wednesday Night Zombie Fever on 2BACR 100.9 FM. I've just realised how weird this is going to sound on the podcast when I keep coming back saying the exact same thing in the exact same way. But I can always edit it. Speaking of the podcasts, those are ready to go. I will be getting those up for you within the next couple of days, so you'll be able to relive all of the highlights of our previous 8 episodes of Wednesday Night Zombie Fever. You'll notice that last week's train wreck with me and Bridget with Bridget and I, looks like gold compared to this week. I've never felt more like a drinking game. I think that Stephanie and Bridget are probably listening in Japan, doing shots of sake whenever there's dead air time, or I repeat something, or I just sound like I'm flailing around like a child in a wading pool. Anyway, speaking of listening from Japan, remember you can tell your friends to listen anywhere in the world through TuneIn Radio, and let me know how you listen to 2BACR through the Facebook page, either Wednesday Night Zombie Fever or the 2BACR page. Meanwhile, in our Who's the Best WNZF Presenter poll, I'm not the only one to have voted. So it's not biased whatsoever, but it is a tie between Stephanie and myself. I don't know why Bridget doesn't have any votes. I think it's because I voted for me and Steph's boyfriend voted for her, but like I said, completely not biased and completely objective, clearly. Oh, and then Dave only voted for Steph because I wasn't going to make him a presenter next week. So far, the feedback from Facebook hasn't really been going my way, obviously. Even though I'm the only one here, I'm still not the best presenter. So now I feel bad about playing all of your song requests. Only the people who vote for me are now going to get their songs played on air. Meanwhile, I did say on the Facebook page that I will be fulfilling one of the promises that I made with Bridget last week. We actually said that we were going to read some poems. Now, I looked up some poems on poemhunter.com. Yes, it's a thing. And I was looking for poems on being alone, just to continue tonight's theme. And there are a lot of these. There are 32 pages of these. Basically, it's a website where anyone can upload a poem. So basically, it's an online therapist, in a way. And nothing showcases this more than the alone section of this website. I'm going to read you some great excerpts here. Firstly, there's Alone on Sea. Alone I lay on a wooden raft. Alone I stay in the dark. Alone I pray to survive. Alone I may not survive. And it goes on like that. Then there's another poem, Alone I cried. Alone I cried again. Alone I am with me. Lonely in a world of my mist. Alone I reach to touch your wrist. Wow, Alone at Sea comes up again. Here's another one, titled simply Alone. Alone I walk the streets at night. Alone I pray to end this life. Alone I am, alone I stay. Alone I live in endless strife. In fact, all of these are just simply named Alone. Here's Alone I sit, alone I think, alone I experience, alone I cry. Now, people, this is a little literal. You don't have to start every single sentence or every single line with the word alone. So there aren't really a lot of great poets on this website, but if you do need to find a poem for any occasion, I'm sure you could find one. God, they are particularly morbid, aren't they? Do not leave me alone, Daddy, all alone, alone. Alone I travel, alone I cry. Lying thinking last night how to find my soul a home where water is not thirsty. Yeah, so anyone with any spare time on their hands, they can go and browse those. I did promise last week to Karen that I would read some poetry, so there you go, Karen. Well done. Karen's not listening. Karen is in Japan with Steph and Bridget, laughing at me reading poetry to them while they're safely in another country. Safely in another country, not winning the Who's the Best Presenter poll, could I just add. Here's another thing that I started last week, given that we are speaking of poetry. And I did promise to read a poem. And the other thing, they weren't poems. They were lines that all began with the same word, which isn't poetry. We began reading, Bridget and I, given that it was the only poem that we could remember, The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. We could only remember the first line, which was 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood. Now, I also mentioned last week that the other two didn't want me to do my story time with Rachel segment. It was just going to be me reading from a book. They didn't support that. In hindsight, they were absolutely right. That would have been stupid. But I am going to read the Robert Frost poem. Sit back. I don't really have any great music for this, though. Should I put music in the background? No, I won't. Okay, I'll just read it. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveller long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then I took the other as just as far, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I can see that a lot of people are actually messaging me on Facebook right now. This is obviously not part of the poem, but I will finish this poem despite everybody's objections. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. Robert Frost. Yes. So there you go. Now I've actually read a poem, and in a way I have read a story on air, and no one was here to stop me, and that has made all the difference. Okay. As always, given that that was a request from one of our listeners, who actually is not listening at all, let us know on Facebook what you want to hear on Wednesday Night Zombie Fever, particularly for next week. Stephanie and Bridget will be back next Thursday from Japan, so we'll be hearing about all of their travel stories the week after. Meanwhile, the Who is the Best WNZF presenter is still neck and neck with Stephanie and myself, so jump on there and vote for me, given that I'm the only one here doing any presenting at all. In the meantime, as I said, the podcasts will be coming. And right now, this is... Sorry, guys, I've got to work out my computer. This is Fort Atlantic with No One Will Know on 2BACR 100.9 FM. That is nearly it from me tonight. I'll be back on Monday and Tuesday with Breakfast with Rachel on 2BACR for non-stop music for your mornings from 7 to 9 a.m. And of course, I'll be back next week as well. On next week's show, it's going to be an action-packed week. It's just me again, as Stephanie and Bridget will be tearing up Japan. Next week, this is a topic I was going to wait until those two were back, but I want to know, since we have been talking about television a lot at the moment, talking about adaptations, do you think that book adaptations are better suited to television or to films? I'll be putting up a poll about that on the Wednesday Night Zombie Fever page. As always, get in your song requests for next week. In the meantime, I do have an announcement to make. Yes, everyone, I am the winner of the Best WNZF Presenter Poll. Yes. Okay, so to be fair, one of those votes was from me, but I did beat Steph by one, which means she can vote, though. They have Facebook in Japan, even if the people who run Facebook in Japan are extremely unhappy because they've got so much freedom in their work lives. Anyway, so let me know on Facebook what you want to hear for next week. In the meantime, have a great week, have a fantastic weekend, and I'll be back next week. You've been listening to Wednesday Night Zombie Fever on 2BACR 100.9 FM.
He did the monster mash. It was a graveyard smash. It caught on in a flash. He did the monster